The Nexus Prime Academy had always prided itself on being the most prestigious educational institution in the Andromeda sector, a gleaming monument to civilized learning perched on the perfectly manicured world of Kepler-7. Here, where the gravity was a comfortable 0.8 standard and the most dangerous wildlife consisted of butterfly-like creatures that occasionally bumped into windows, the galaxy's elites sent their offspring to learn about the universe in complete safety. Professor Zixthala adjusted her ceremonial teaching robes and gazed out at her Xenobiology 101 class with the satisfaction of someone who had never encountered anything more threatening than a particularly aggressive houseplant. Her students, a collection of pampered young beings from equally safe worlds, lounged in their anti-gravity chairs with the casual confidence of those who had never questioned whether their next meal might try to eat them first. Today, she announced with academic authority, we shall discuss the fascinating topic of planetary habitability classifications. As you know, the Galactic Environmental Council has spent centuries cataloging worlds based on their safety ratings. A student from the crystalline moon of Serenity 9 raised what might generously be called a hand. Professor, what about those old stories about death worlds? My grandmother used to tell tales about planets where everything supposedly tried to kill you. The classroom erupted in polite laughter. Professor Zixthala's facial tendrils twitched with amusement. Ah, yes, the ancient myths. Pure fiction, of course. The very concept defies biological logic. How could complex life evolve on a world where survival was constantly threatened? It's mathematically impossible. Another student, this one from the peaceful gardens of Harmony Station, chimed in. I heard there was supposed to be a planet called Earth, where the creatures actually consumed other living beings instead of photosynthesizing like civilized life forms. Preposterous, Professor Zixthala declared. The energy inefficiency alone would prevent such a system from developing. No, class, these Death World stories are simply cautionary tales invented by our ancestors to teach us to appreciate our peaceful existence. The discussion continued in this vein for another hour, with students and professor alike reveling in their intellectual superiority over such primitive concepts. They spoke of these mythical worlds with the same academic detachment one might discuss unicorns or perpetual motion machines. Interesting from a theoretical perspective, but obviously impossible in reality. It was during this scholarly discourse that the classroom's communication system chimed with an urgent message from the admissions office. Professor Zixthala's expression shifted from academic smugness to confused concern as she read the notification. It appears, she said slowly, that we have a new transfer student joining us today from, well, this must be a clerical error. The paperwork says, Earth. The classroom fell silent except for the gentle hum of the environmental systems. Several students exchanged glances that suggested they were wondering if their professor had finally succumbed to academic stress. Surely that's impossible, whispered the student from Serenity 9. Earth is just a myth, right? Before Professor Zixthala could respond, the classroom door slid open with its usual soft hiss. What walked through that door would later be described by witnesses as the moment their understanding of the universe shifted on its axis, though at the time, most were too stunned to form coherent thoughts. The being that entered appeared remarkably similar to several known species. Bipedal, roughly humanoid, with the standard arrangement of sensory organs. She had dark hair pulled back in what would later be identified as a ponytail, and she wore simple clothing that seemed almost aggressively practical. What struck everyone immediately was not her appearance, but her demeanor. She moved with the fluid confidence of a predator, her eyes scanning the room with an alertness that suggested she was cataloging potential threats and escape routes. Sorry I'm late, she said in perfectly accented Galactic standard. I'm Kira Volkov. Immigration processing took forever, and then I had to fill out about 50 forms for my pet transport permit. The collective intake of breath from 37 different species created a sound like a small atmospheric disturbance. Professor Zixthala's tendrils went rigid with shock. You're actually from Earth? She managed to stammer. Kira shrugged, a gesture that somehow conveyed both casual dismissal and potential violence. Born and raised in what used to be called Siberia. Nice place, if you don't mind the cold, or the bears, or the wolves, or well, you get the idea. The student from Harmony Station made a noise that might have been a whimper. Bears? Wolves? Those are... Those are actual creatures? Oh yeah, tons of them, though they're pretty much harmless unless you're being stupid about it. The real dangerous stuff is usually smaller, like the spiders, or the jellyfish, or the... Please, Professor Zixthala interrupted, her voice climbing several octaves. Perhaps you could take a seat and we could discuss this more academically? Kira nodded and moved toward an empty chair, carrying what appeared to be a small ventilated container. The sight of this innocent-looking pet carrier sent waves of terror through the classroom that would have been comical if the students weren't genuinely fearing for their lives. "What?" asked the student from Serenity 9 in a voice barely above a whisper. "Is in the box?" "Oh, this is Jasper," Kira said cheerfully, setting the carrier on her desk. "He's my emotional support gecko. University said I could bring him as long as I had the proper permits. Took 3 months to get the paperwork sorted out, but apparently I'm the first human to attend an off-world institution, so they didn't really have protocols in place." The word gecko sent Professor Zixthala scrambling for her emergency lexicon. After a moment of frantic searching, she found the entry and immediately wished she hadn't. "According to this," she announced in a voice that had lost all pretense of academic composure, "a gecko is a carnivorous reptile with specialized toe pads that allow it to climb vertical surfaces and it says here they have venom-spitting capabilities." Kira burst into laughter, a sound that somehow managed to be both melodious and terrifying. "Venom-spitting? Who wrote your database? Jasper's just a leopard gecko. He eats crickets and sleeps under his heat lamp. The only thing he's ever successfully hunted is his own tail, and even then he usually loses." "Crickets?" another student asked faintly. "Insects, little hoppy things. Don't worry, I brought freeze-dried ones for the trip, though I did pack some live ones for special occasions. Jasper likes his food to move around a bit." The casual mention of feeding live creatures to other creatures sent several students into what appeared to be mild shock. Professor Zixthala was furiously making notes, her academic training warring with her survival instincts. "And this is considered a normal pet on your world?" she asked. "Oh, Jasper's pretty tame compared to what most people keep. My neighbor had a python named Delilah, beautiful snake about 12 feet long, used to eat rabbits whole, and my cousin breeds tarantulas as a hobby, has about 200 of them in his basement." The student from Harmony Station appeared to be hyperventilating. 200 spiders? Tarantulas, technically. They're actually pretty docile. It's the little ones you have to watch out for. Black widows, brown recluses, Sydney funnel webs. Those guys will mess you up if you're not careful. Professor Zixthala was scribbling notes so frantically that her stylus was beginning to smoke. "And these deadly creatures just roam freely on your planet?" "Well, yeah. It's not like we can put up no spiders signs everywhere. Though most of the really dangerous stuff stays away from populated areas. Unless you go looking for it, or accidentally step on it, or if it's mating season, or if you smell like food, or if it's Tuesday." "Tuesday?" Professor Zixthala's voice had reached a pitch that only her species young could typically hear. "Figure of speech. Point is, you learn to coexist. Most things won't bother you if you don't bother them, except mosquitoes. Those things are just evil." The mention of mosquitoes required another frantic consultation with the lexicon. Professor Zixthala's tendrils began to quiver as she read the entry. "Blood-sucking parasites that can transmit deadly diseases. And they're common? Everywhere. Billions of them. Maybe trillions. They're like nature's way of saying, hey, remember you're not actually in charge here. Though they're nothing compared to the really fun stuff. Ever heard of Australian wildlife?" The collective shudder that ran through the classroom was visible from orbit. Professor Zixthala closed her lexicon with a snap. "I think that's quite enough for today. Class dismissed. Please proceed to the nearest counseling center for trauma processing." As the students filed out in various states of shock, Professor Zixthala remained behind, staring at Kira with the fascination of someone watching a natural disaster unfold. "Your entire planet," she said slowly, "is populated by creatures that actively try to kill each other. Kill and eat mostly. It's called a food chain. Pretty standard biological concept, I thought, though I guess if you've only ever lived on worlds where everything gets its energy from sunlight and good vibes, it might seem a bit intense." "And you evolved in this environment?" Kira nodded, gently opening Jasper's carrier to let him crawl onto her hand. The Gecko, all of 6 inches long and clearly more interested in napping than world conquest, blinked slowly at the professor. Survival of the fittest and all that. Though honestly, Earth's probably gotten a bit soft lately. My great-grandmother used to tell stories about when they had to deal with things like saber-toothed cats and cave bears. Now those were proper predators. Professor Zixthala watched in horrified fascination as Kira produced a small container of what appeared to be dried insects and offered one to Jasper. The Gecko accepted it with all the enthusiasm of a creature that had never considered the moral implications of its dietary choices. "This is going to revolutionize everything," the professor whispered. "Our entire understanding of evolutionary biology, planetary classification, the very nature of life itself." "If it helps," Kira said, gently stroking Jasper's head with one finger, "most humans find the universe pretty boring once you get used to it. All these safe worlds with their careful environmental controls and their non-threatening wildlife. Where's the challenge? Where's the excitement? How do you know you're alive if nothing's trying to eat you?" Within hours, news of the human student and her pet Venom spitter had spread throughout the academy and beyond. The galactic media descended on Nexus Prime like locusts, though given the recent revelations about Earth's ecosystem, perhaps that comparison was more apt than anyone realized. Academic conferences were hastily organized, papers were frantically rewritten. The Galactic Environmental Council called emergency sessions to discuss reclassifying their entire planetary safety rating system. The University of Centauri offered Kira a full scholarship if she would transfer and bring her entire pet collection. Through it all, Kira remained remarkably unimpressed with the fuss. She attended her classes, took notes on galactic civilizations, and occasionally let Jasper crawl around on her desk during lectures. The Gecko, blissfully unaware of his celebrity status, continued to eat freeze-dried crickets and sleep under his heat lamp. "I don't understand what the big deal is," she told a reporter from the Galactic News Network. "Earth's really not that dangerous once you know what you're doing. Sure, there are a few things that can kill you, but that's what makes it interesting. Besides, most of our predators are pretty reasonable. They generally only eat you if they're hungry, threatened, or if you're stupid enough to get between them and their young." The reporter's mandibles clicked nervously. "And this is considered reasonable behavior?" "More reasonable than some of the politicians I've met," Kira replied with a grin that showed entirely too many teeth for comfort. As the semester progressed, Kira became something of a celebrity throughout the galaxy. Her casual observations about Earth's ecosystem became the subject of intense academic study. Her offhand comments about human survival strategies were analyzed by military strategists. Her description of Earth's weather patterns sent climatologists into existential spirals. "It's really quite flattering," she told her parents during their weekly video call. "But I'm starting to get homesick. These alien worlds are so sterile. No real weather, no dangerous wildlife, no environmental challenges. It's like living in a museum." Her mother, who was visible in the background wrestling with what appeared to be a small dinosaur, looked up from her struggle. "How are your grades, dear? And make sure you're eating enough. These alien foods probably don't have the proper nutrients." "The grades are fine, Mum, though I think I might have traumatized my xenobiology professor. She's been asking a lot of questions about Earth's ecosystem, and I think she's starting to have nightmares about the food chain." "Well, don't tell her about the time you found that grizzly bear in the garage," her father called from somewhere off screen. "She'd probably have a heart attack." "Dad, that was a black bear, and it was in the shed, not the garage, and it was only there because it was raining and the door was open." The distinction between types of bears and their preferred sheltering locations was lost on her parents, but it would have sent Professor Zixthala into another round of frantic note-taking. As the academic year drew to a close, the university held a special ceremony to honor their first human student. Kira stood on the stage, holding Jasper's carrier, while administrators praised her for expanding their understanding of life in the universe. "Through her presence here," the Chancellor announced, "we have learnt that our previous conception of planetary habitability was sadly limited. The existence of Earth and its inhabitants challenges our fundamental assumptions about the nature of life itself." Kira accepted her certificate with the same casual confidence she brought to everything else. In her brief acceptance speech, she thanked the university for the experience and mentioned that she was looking forward to returning to Earth for summer break. "I'm planning to visit some friends in Australia," she said. "Maybe do some hiking in the outback. Should be relaxing after all these safe, controlled environments." The mention of Australia sent several administrators into quiet panic. Their hurried consultations with the now infamous lexicon revealed entries for creatures with names like drop bear, inland taipan, and saltwater crocodile. The fact that these were considered recreational destinations rather than military obstacles was a concept that would require several more academic conferences to fully process. As Kira packed her belongings and prepared to leave, Professor Zixthala approached her one final time. "I have to ask," she said, "knowing what we know now about your world, how do you view the rest of the galaxy? Does our civilization seem weak to you?" Kira considered this carefully while Jasper dozed in his carrier. "Not weak, exactly, just different. You've created something beautiful here. These peaceful worlds, these safe environments, these civilizations that have moved beyond the constant struggle for survival. It's impressive in its own way. But I think you might be missing something. The struggle, the challenge, the constant reminder that life is precious because it's fragile. On Earth, every day you survive is a victory. Every sunset you see is a gift, because you made it through another day in a world that doesn't care whether you live or die." Professor Zixthala's tendrils drooped thoughtfully. "And you prefer that to safety?" "I prefer feeling alive, and sometimes that means accepting a little danger." As Kira's transport lifted off from Nexus Prime's perfectly maintained spaceport, she looked down at the carefully groomed world below. Beautiful, certainly. Safe, undoubtedly. But as she settled back in her seat and checked on Jasper one more time, she couldn't help but smile at the thought of returning to a world where the weather could kill you, the wildlife considered you a menu item, and every sunrise was earned rather than guaranteed. The irony wasn't lost on her that in a galaxy full of advanced civilizations and perfectly controlled environments, the most dangerous thing in the universe might just be a human with a pet gecko and a casual attitude towards survival. Back on Earth, her friends were already making plans for her return visit. They'd heard about her celebrity status and wanted to show her some of the really interesting parts of the planet she'd missed while growing up in the relatively tame regions of Siberia. "We're thinking the Amazon rainforest," her friend texted, "or maybe the Sahara, somewhere properly dangerous to help you readjust to normal life." Kira laughed as she read the message. Normal life. As if there was anything normal about a world where the insects could kill you, the plants could poison you, and the weather could freeze you solid or boil you alive. But then again, after spending months surrounded by beings who considered a gentle breeze a serious environmental hazard, maybe normal was exactly what she needed. Jasper stirred in his carrier, opened one sleepy eye, and then went back to sleep. Even he seemed to understand that they were going home to a world where survival was a daily adventure rather than a guaranteed outcome. And somewhere in the academic halls of Nexus Prime, Professor Zixthala was revising her entire curriculum to include a new course, Deathworld Studies, Understanding Life in High-Risk Environments. The waiting list was already 3 semesters long. The galaxy, it seemed, had developed a sudden fascination with the concept of danger. Who would have thought that the most educational thing in the universe would turn out to be a human and her pet gecko? After all, they'd called Earth a death world myth until a transfer student proved that sometimes the most terrifying stories are the ones that turn out to be true.